Hi, Journeyers. I'm Tony Carnes, your host for A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. Welcome to the show. The world is pretty tumultuous today, and parents are worried about their children. Or are they worried? We think that religious parents must be particularly worried because of all of the input from the world out there, social media, TV, movies. Or are they worried? And if they are worried, is there anything they can do to help their children grow up in their religious faith? Or are they doomed? Well, today we have a sociologist, Amy Adamczyk, here to help us with some of these questions. And she and Christian Smith have published a study that they did called Handing Down the Faith, How Parents Pass Their Religion Onto the Next Generation. So let's talk to Amy and see if you need to be worried, or can there be something you can do and it's not the ship Titanic for your faith? Amy, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
You started on this research project with Christian Smith on how do parents think about religion and how they pass it down to kids and what are their expectations or hopes. How did you, it's just right on the face, is very interesting, but how did you get interested in this project?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of research out there about how young people view religion and even how their views about religion change over time. And so we had a lot of that information. We had done some of those studies already. And the missing link was what is going on with parents. There's almost nothing in that area that has been done on how they see their role in passing on religious belief. And so we saw that there was really a gap in the literature about how we understood religious faith transmission. And so that's when we stepped in and said, we can try to answer some of these questions. So let's go interview parents. And we interviewed parents, we interviewed about 200 parents, more than 200 parents across the United States, but we also relied on a whole bunch of survey data from a wide range of different resources. And we were able to put together a lot of the information that you now find in the book. We're excited to share it with people.
The group that you're associated with does a lot of research on youth and their faith. And so you saw this gap. When did you notice the gap? Did you notice it right away, or did somebody come to you and say, well, what do the parents think? How did you decide this was a gap?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had been doing some research on young people, and Chris has done even more than I have done on young people. And he had written several books where he was talking with these young people. He started talking with them when they were in their late teens and then followed them up until they were almost age 30. And at this point, I think Chris has probably published maybe 3 or 4 books in this area. My research is in a slightly different space, but it also focuses on young people. And we kind of came together and said, hey, what's going on with parents? We just don't know what their views are. He hadn't interviewed them for anything he had done, and I hadn't interviewed them for anything that I had done. And now initially, when we first started talking about young people, we didn't want to interview parents. We wanted to interview the young people. We wanted to know where they were at and what they were doing. But once we kind of got those questions done, then the question was, well, wait a minute, parents have this incredible influence on young people. I mean, we think it's the most important influence, more important than friends, more important than peers, more important than anything else happening in the culture or schools and so forth. And yet we really don't understand what they think they're doing. How are they conceptualizing the role of religion in their own lives? And how are they thinking about the ways that they transmit it to their children? And so then that's when we were able to kind of step in and say, all right, let's try to unravel this mystery. Let's try to figure out what's going on here.
Now, I was surprised that the parents, that their understanding of religion and what they expect that it will provide their kids. I was surprised that their belief is not dogmatic. It's more what?
Oh, yeah. It's very moderate. They don't want too much religion. They don't want too little religion. They want it just right down the middle. It's different than how I grew up, where I think kind of more religion, the better was the perspective. But parents want to have a good relationship with their kids. They spend more time with their kids today than they did even 50 years ago. So it's a different world for young people to be raised in. Parents want to be involved in everything that they're doing, and they want a close relationship with their kids. And when their kids grow up, they want to continue to be involved and be a part of their lives. And they want to pass on a moderate level of religion so that they can connect with their kids, and so that they have this relationship that is infused with religion, which they enjoy and they want their kids to have as well. But they don't want it to be too much. And part of that is related to, I would say that, again, the context, the historical context of what we're dealing with, which is a lot of the parents grew up thinking about religious extremism and terrorism and the events of 9/11, and they don't want anything too extreme for their kids, in part because they don't think it's going to be good for them. Parents want to give their kids tools that they can use that are going to help them in life and that are going to make them happy and that are going to make them connect with their own parents. But they don't want to give them things that are going to cause them challenges and conflict. So that's why they often only want to transmit moderate levels of religious belief.
And the beliefs that they want to transmit are very general. You said there were really sort of two clumps of beliefs they want to pass on about religion to their kids. And what were those two, and what does that mean for raising kids?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the parents want, the way they see their children are these very unique and interesting individuals, and they want them to use religion as a tool that is going to better their lives, that's going to help them, move forward. And so, that's what they're, hoping to do for their children.
Not to get saved for heaven, or not to talk the truth to the world, but to have a functional life. Is that what they're saying?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So they want them to, religion is part of their toolkit. And so their parents are going to, teach them how to read. They're going to teach them how to write. They're going to teach them how to do various things, learn how to ride a bike, maybe play cards. They're going to teach them all these things. And religion is part of that toolkit. That is going to be the thing that is going to help them in life, help them be happy, young, well-functioning individuals. And so that's what's seen as religion's role.
I have a question here. It may be jumping ahead a little bit, but when I think about such a generalized religion, it's almost like what we call therapeutic religion, but it's a little bit more than that, because they want a big picture of life. But it doesn't emphasize truth, doesn't emphasize suffering. It sort of says you get in religion because it's a good motor for your boat through life. But can that religion, if it's passed on, can that sustain itself? If there's no content to the religion other than, it's a good, it's one of the toolkit, then can it sustain itself very long? Because as you know, there have been a lot of studies in the past that strict religion is more successful in hanging on to their kids. That is, strict in its demands, because they rationally that if something demands a lot of you and you have to sacrifice for it, you hold on to it more. And there's this theory about how religion sticks. Are you saying that doesn't happen?
I mean, it depends on the parents. So in general, we interviewed parents all across the United States. And so we
all
interviewed
types of religions, right?
Yeah. We interviewed Hindu parents, we interviewed Buddhist parents, we interviewed, Jewish parents, all kinds. Mm-hmm. And, for some of these parents, passing on, say, for example, for Muslim parents, passing on extreme form of Islam, they didn't see that was going to benefit their kid living in America. And they too often weren't of that belief, right? So parents often wanted to pass on what they had at a moderate level, not too much, not too little. I mean, I think one of the challenges is that they felt like if they pass on a more extreme form of religious belief, not only might it cause their kid problems, but the young person may not want to hang out with their parents in the same way, because the parents aren't going to necessarily be a part of this extreme perspective. And so they were trying to, protect themselves a little bit from that too, because they want to have this nice relationship with them. Now, in terms of transmitting religious belief for future generations, how is it going to work? Well, I say that, on average, our parents wanted to pass on moderate levels of religious belief, but there were some distinctions, which is our conservative Protestant parents, our more conservative Jewish parents, a lot of our Muslim parents, our Mormon parents, they wanted to pass on, a higher level of that. And they were willing to go the distance in that regard too. They were actively involved in their religious faith in a way that, say, Catholics and mainline Protestants weren't. And they were going to show their kids this religion, and they wanted to pass down, a similar type along those lines. So there were some variations, but people in general didn't want it to be too extreme because they didn't see it as, being helpful. Now, what does that do for the future? It's a good question. I don't know. I think that for parents who are successful, if they're able to pass on successfully conservative Protestant religious beliefs, then the content will still be there. For parents who, don't belong to a strict religion, say Catholics or mainline Protestants in general, then, these religions are already losing a lot of members and a lot of adherents. So this isn't necessarily a surprise if this isn't the religious belief of 50 years ago of our parents' generation.
Now, you looked at different styles of parenting, and you found one style that was more effective in passing on religion than other styles. Can you talk a little bit about that, what those styles are, and which one did you find that had a significant impact on passing on the faith?
Yeah, so there's kind of 4 major parenting styles that we tend to talk about when we think about the research on the social science research in this area. You can think about the authoritarian parents. So these are parents who are strict and demanding, but they don't exhibit a lot of emotional warmth or support for their children. We have permissive parents, parents who are all about affection and empathy, but they don't establish any boundaries or standards or expectations. They're very permissive. Then we have disengaged parents. These are parents who don't have either of those, who aren't particularly strict with their children, but they also don't offer a lot of affection and warmth. And then finally, you have what we call the authoritative parenting style. And, this parenting style captures 2 key characteristics. First, it's all about holding children to clear and demanding expectations and standards and boundaries within life. So there are rules, there are, costs to doing various things that aren't approved. There are things you're supposed to do. There are expectations. And then the second piece of that is there's also an abundance of warmth, there's an abundance of support, and there's a lot of expressive care. And it's the combination of having these clear expectations for your children mixed in with all of this warmth and caring that seems to be especially helpful for transmitting religious faith to the next generation. And part of that
authoritative style of parent, that's what y'all call it, the authoritative style, not authoritarian. Exactly. But authoritative because it sets rules and boundaries and actually does demand a cost from the kids. You have to obey these rules or, you don't get something or something like that. And combine that with a lot of warmth and emotional care and closeness to the children. That's the authoritative parenting style. Correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the reasons that this is such a successful parenting style, and again, that's the authoritative parenting style, is because the kids learn what the boundaries and expectations are with regards to religion. So maybe they do have to go to church on a regular basis, or they do need to read from the Bible, or they need to say prayers with their parents, or they need to, not goof off in Sunday school class, or whatever it may be. But there is also a great deal of caring and support and love and attention coming from their parents. And so what happens is that the children form a very strong bond with their parents. And so as they get older, what this means is that the kids want to spend time with their parents. They want to do the things that their parents do and that the parents like. And if the parents are trying to pass on religious belief, which is what many of the parents we met were trying to do, then the children then want to belong and be a part of that religion as well. So that's why it's so effective. Part of it is you just like these people that are your parents. They love you and they give you lots of warmth and support. And at the same time, there's also clear boundaries. So you're learning the religion. You're, abiding by their standards. You understand that you can't just blow it all off or, not engage at all. And at the same time, as you're engaging, you're getting a lot of affirmation and caring and support. And you like that. That feels good. And so as you get older, you've learned like, oh, religion is something that I like, that, you have to learn it. There are boundaries and expectations, but it's enjoyable. And I like being with these people called my parents, and your parents like that too. And so there's this whole thing that sort of happens that's really beautiful when, parents are able to enact this parenting style that you just don't see with the other types. You can't just, beat up your kid about not going to church without giving them some support and love and, talking with them about it and engaging them and being, having a lot of affection and caring for them.
Well, I saw it seemed to me one question I have. Jewish parents have, I think, a very high degree of authoritative style, 40% of Jewish parents or something like that. And yet they are the least likely to pass on their religion to their kids. How do you explain? Am I reading that right? And why is that the case? It didn't work. Or maybe it did.
I think part of what is going on there is that the Jewish parents that we interviewed were pretty liberal. And so we didn't interview Orthodox Jewish parents. And so if that were the case, I think things would be a bit different in terms of both parenting style and also in terms of their level of success. Again,
but you interviewed conservative parents, that is the denomination in Judaism called conservative, which the main seminary is here in New York City. One reason I'm bringing this up. And yet the authoritative style, which was pretty high, are they not concerned really about passing on religion? Is that why? We don't know.
Maybe we need more research in this area, but
for people to view, yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of parents did want to pass on more moderate levels. And so this may have been one of those groups of parents. I personally, I did a lot of the research here in New York City. I interviewed tons and tons of Jewish parents. I didn't find many that were especially strict or, very, they were lovely people, but they did seem to fall on the more relaxed side in terms of religious belief. It wasn't, I think it was a core of their being culturally, but I didn't see a great deal of that with regards to, religious rituals and engagement. Parents wanted their kids to be engaged and participate, but the strict parents that I met tended to be from Mormon backgrounds or conservative Protestant backgrounds or Muslim backgrounds. Those were the the religious origins of the parents that seemed to be, more on the stricter level, and they were more successful.
Now, one thing you found out that you looked at not only that they were engaged with their kids and close emotional, you looked to see how they actually work to pass on the faith. That is, whether it's just taking them to Sunday school or to confirmation or to, services once in a while, or whether they even talked to their children about their faith. And you honed in and say there was one thing that parents can do, or at least they do say they do, that has a really big impact on passing the faith. What was that?
Yeah, that was two-way conversations were hugely important for the parents and the young people that that were in our study. And so what is a two-way conversation? What are we talking about? Well, part of that is when your child initiates some sort of conversation related to religion that you may or may not want to engage. The important things is that parents engage it. So for example, one actually Jewish parents told me, oh, our kids want to talk about what happens to a dead body. And we don't don't necessarily want to talk about that. We don't necessarily see that as like part of our religion. But if this is a segue into a larger conversation that helps unwrap something for them, then we engage it and we're open to it. And so a lot of young people grow up with parents who only have one-way conversations. And that just means that like your dad is preaching to you or a mom is telling you about something or they're going on and on. I think it's really important, and our study shows this, that you have to open up your ears as a parent. You have to be listening for those opportunities to engage your children when they initiate it. So it can't just be you talking at them or talking down to them or telling them how it is or telling them about scripture. I mean, it can be if they're also engaged in it, but you know, unfortunately, they may bring up topics you don't want to talk about or that you don't know that much about, but you have to be ready to go ahead and be like, okay, here's my opportunity. Here's my segue. This is where we can go from here.
And you seem to show that if they do this like every day, that's the most important impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I just want to add,
let's have a talk before you date, or you know, this once in a lifetime talk. Not even a monthly, not even a weekly has the same impact as if you talk about it every day. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Tony. But one thing to keep in mind is that it has to be authentic. I mean, a lot of parents, I think, want to pass on religious belief, but don't actually believe it themselves. So you can't, you know, be like pushing this on your kids or talking with them about it, and then they don't see you go to religious services, or they don't see you engage, or they don't ever see you read religious scripture. Like, I think the importance is that authentic part. So even though a lot of people want their kids to be religious, but you have to believe it too. They want to do the thing that you do. So if you're really into it, then you do it. And there's different ways to do this, right? On the one hand, you can be very direct with your kids and talk with them about religion, hopefully when they initiate it. And at the same time, there's other approaches. So we had parents who said, you know what, in the evenings, I don't sit in my bedroom and read the Bible. I sit in the living room and read the Bible so that my child can see me reading the Bible. So I'm not saying anything to them. I'm not preaching or whatever. It's just I'm choosing to expose them to the fact that this is something I find important. I had a wonderful Catholic father talked about how on the way home from Mass, they would turn on the radio and listen to this Catholic program. I don't know which one it was, where they would critique the minister's sermon afterwards. And he said, you know, they'd be like going at it. What's the good things? What's the bad thing? What's going on? No, they're just listening to the radio. You know, this just happens to be this critique on the radio about the Catholic service. But the fact that they have that on and that they're exposing their kids to that is important. It's showing like, hey, we care about this, even when we're kind of not directly talking about it.
But they do need to talk. And that was one thing I was really interested in. You have to, faith is like learning a second language, you say. The religious talk is not natural, or at least it needs to be, in order to talk about it, you got to have a language to talk about it. Did parents feel they had a language to talk about to kids? I mean, and also talking religion to kids is a whole different story. Did they have that language? And if they don't, how do they get it?
Yeah, a lot of the parents we spoke to were quite confident. And this was an interesting thing about our study is we asked parents, well, who's in charge of religious faith transmission, you or your congregations? Because of course, congregations have incredible resources to pass on kind of the nuts and bolts about what is going on with regards to religion. And parents were very clear that it was up to them to transmit religious belief, and that congregations were secondary, and that they would use them as best as they could. And they did appreciate that congregations would, teach their children the stuff that they didn't know or they didn't remember, like various Bible verses or various, religious stories or, different things, the names of the books of the Bible. They appreciated that, but that simply gave parents a segue in which to gauge their children once the kids got home. So the parents felt confident enough. Now, Tony, we didn't quiz them on their knowledge about religion, but they didn't seem to have too many problems with it, and at the same time very much appreciated. One of the roles they did say that the congregation could do is teach them the nuts and bolts of the religion. So it would be interesting to go back and think more about, like, no, what exactly do you what are you teaching them? For a lot of them, I think it's pretty casual. I'm not sure it's much formal information, but they, the idea is that they're trying to engage them, that you're trying to bring it to the heart rather than necessarily just the mind.
Amy, you say that it's the parents who are the key. of passing on religion, and that the congregations are not as important. They can do some things to help the parents or to engage the kids, but really it's up to the parents. I'm wondering, where do the grandparents have a contribution to make?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number one thing is that the grandparents be around. So if they're on the other part of the country or on the other side of the world, they can't have that much of an influence because they're just not interacting with the young person. But when they are around, they have a huge role to play in terms of religious traditions, in terms of passing on stories, in terms of making religion fun, in terms of developing memories with your grandparents. So there's a lot for them to do. So that's, I think, a real positive if the grandparents can be around.
Now, when you bring grandparents in, you're actually talking about tradition and about passing on, what's on before. But you say that that's not so important, that the religion is not a tradition they're passing on. Religion is a part of the toolkit. So can grandparents really contribute to that? When the kids just say, well, we love you, grandmother, grandfather, those are good for you, but our toolkit is more modern and spiffy, and we don't see religion as tradition. We see it as one of the arrows in the quiver that we may or may not use. Or does grandparents start to shift the meaning of religion for kids?
I think the importance of grandparents is that they just make it really fun for the kids, and that they, make it an interesting thing to do, a cool thing to do, a nice memory. Whether or not they're, going to be taking with them, major religious content may not be the case, but the idea that they make it enjoyable, that there's somebody other than their parents that are helping them with this thing, that's all really important for helping to pass it on.
Now, as you finish this project, and you've gone around, spoken to many audiences, what's the response? How do people respond to your when you talk about it?
Yeah. We've gotten big responses from both parents, but especially congregations, because congregations turned out not to have as big of an impact as I think congregations would like to have.
Oh, okay. So they pick on that because you probably speak in some churches, or at least church people are there, or synagogue people, and they're saying, "Oh, where do we fit?" There's so many questions, but we got to wind up. I'm Tony Carnes, your host for A Journey Through NYC Religions. Thank you for being with us. Amy, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.